On April 29, 1945, in Milan's Piazzale Loreto, Italy's former dictator Benito Mussolini met a gruesome fate. The world watched in shock as an angry crowd hung his lifeless body and that of his mistress, Clara Petacci, upside down from a metal girder at a gas station. A howling mob, kicking, spitting, and cursing at their remains.
Just hours earlier, Mussolini and Petacci had been captured and executed by Italian partisans. The man who once promised to revive the glory of ancient Rome was now a mutilated corpse on public display, reviled by the people who had idolized him. What happened in Mussolini's final days would change the course of Italian history forever.
To understand how Mussolini met such an end, we need to go back to the beginning of his rise. After World War I, Italy was in ruins. The economy was broken, people were angry, and many felt cheated by the peace deals. Strikes filled the streets, clashes broke out between rival groups, chaos ruled, and then came Benito Mussolini. Once a socialist, now a fiery nationalist, a man who promised to bring order and restore pride to the nation. In October 1922, his black shirt followers marched on Rome, ready to take power by force. The king, Victor Emmanuel III, feared civil war, and so he gave in. Mussolini was invited to form a government, and with that, fascism seized control of Italy. When Mussolini took power, he quickly got rid of Italy's democracy and set up a one-party dictatorship. He gave himself the title Il Duce, which means the leader, and held almost complete control. Mussolini built up his image through constant propaganda, portraying himself as a modern Caesar and a great genius. Italians were taught the phrase, Il Duce ha sempre ragione, the leader is always right. For many people tired of disorder, fascism seemed to bring stability. Trains were said to run on time, public projects improved cities, and Italy appeared stronger on the world stage. But this progress was based on fear and violence. Political opponents were beaten, forced into exile or killed, and personal freedoms were destroyed. In the 1930s, Mussolini's ambitions grew, and Italy became more aggressive. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia and established a new colony through brutal force. The following year, he formed the Rome-Berlin Axis, an alliance with Adolf Hitler's Germany. Italy also introduced Nazi-style racial laws and embraced a militaristic mindset. When World War II began, Mussolini at first held back, but by June 1940, after seeing Hitler's rapid victories, he chose to join the war on Germany's side. Mussolini hoped for quick victories and glory, but instead, this decision dragged Italy into disaster. Benito Mussolini himself was the central figure of this drama. Born in 1883 to a socialist family, he began as a socialist journalist, but transformed into an ultra-nationalist strongman amid post-World War I chaos. To his followers, Il Duce was a charismatic savior who rescued Italy from anarchy and made it proud again. To his enemies, he was a cruel tyrant who crushed liberty and led the nation to ruin through hubris. In truth, Mussolini was both a bold leader with grand visions who could inspire loyalty and a ruthless authoritarian who allowed no opposition. Other important figures shaped Mussolini's fate. King Victor Emmanuel III, the monarch of Italy, had supported Mussolini's rise in 1922. But by 1943, as the country was collapsing, the king turned against him, removing Mussolini from power and ordering his arrest. The Italian partisans were another key force. They were underground resistance fighters, communists, liberals, monarchists, and others who fought the fascist regime with guerrilla tactics. They kept the hope of freedom alive and eventually captured Mussolini, carrying out what many saw as justice. Then there was Adolf Hitler, Mussolini's Axis ally. At first, Hitler admired Mussolini and played the junior partner, but later, he became Mussolini's lifeline. After Mussolini was removed from power in 1943, Hitler sent commandos to rescue him and made him the figurehead of a Nazi-controlled puppet state in northern Italy. This saved Mussolini for a time, but tied his fate completely to Hitler's, an alliance that would ultimately destroy them both. Mussolini's decision to enter World War II marked the beginning of his downfall. Italy's military campaigns quickly turned into disasters. In 1940–41, the Italian army was stopped by the French, defeated by tiny Greece, and crushed in North Africa, only saved from total collapse by German help. The British Navy badly damaged Italy's fleet, and tens of thousands of Italian soldiers surrendered in different battles. The dream of building a new Roman Empire was falling apart. By 1943, the Allies had landed in Sicily and were bombing Italian cities, bringing the war directly to Italy. As the losses grew and life became harder, the Italian people lost their faith in Mussolini. By July 1943, even Mussolini's own allies had turned against him. Members of the fascist Grand Council and King Victor Emmanuel III decided to act. On July 25th, Mussolini was summoned to meet the king, but instead of support, he was dismissed and immediately arrested. Italians were shocked. After 21 years in power, Il Duce was suddenly a prisoner, sent away to a remote mountain location. A new government, led by Marshal Pietro Badoglio, soon signed an armistice with the Allies in September 1943. This deal switched Italy's side in the war, but it also led German forces to occupy much of the country. For a moment, it looked as if Mussolini's story might end in captivity while the war continued. Hitler refused to let Mussolini disappear. In September 1943, German paratroopers carried out a daring mission known as the Gran Sasso Raid, freeing him from his mountain prison. Mussolini was taken to Germany for a short time, then sent back to lead a new puppet state in northern Italy, the Italian Social Republic, based in the town of Salo and fully controlled by the Germans. Mussolini tried to show strength in public, but he was only a shadow of the leader he once had been. The Salo Republic survived only because of German military support and was marked by violence, including the execution of Italian dissidents and even former fascist officials who had turned against him. In southern Italy, the Allies joined forces with anti-fascist Italians to fight for freedom. This sparked a brutal civil war, fascists on one side, resistance fighters on the other, while Allied troops pushed steadily north. By the spring of 1945, Mussolini's fate was sealed. German defences were falling apart, and uprisings were forcing fascists out of city after city. Knowing the end was near, Mussolini made one last attempt to escape. On April 25, 1945, as Milan was being liberated, he fled with a small convoy of loyal followers and his mistress, Clara Petacci. They moved north, aiming to cross into neutral Switzerland or Austria. To avoid recognition, Mussolini disguised himself in a German soldier's greatcoat and helmet, hiding among retreating troops. 2 days later, on April 27, 1945, Mussolini's luck ran out. At the village of Dongo, on Lake Como, local partisan units stopped the convoy. Initially, they didn't realize Mussolini was among the group, but then they discovered Italy's former dictator attempting to hide in one of the trucks. Mussolini was arrested on the spot, along with Petacci. He offered no resistance. One partisan eyewitness noted that Mussolini looked utterly exhausted, spiritually dead, at the moment of capture. At long last, the architect of Italian fascism was in the hands of the Italian people themselves, and there would be no rescue coming this time. With Mussolini captured, the Italian resistance faced a pivotal decision: what to do with the hated dictator. Sandro Pertini, a leading partisan, announced over radio that Mussolini must be executed immediately. "A firing squad is too much of an honor. He deserves to be killed like a mangy dog," he declared bluntly. The order came down from the Committee of National Liberation. Mussolini was to be put to death for his crimes. On April 28, 1945, the sentence was carried out. In the afternoon, Mussolini and Clara Petacci were taken to a roadside near the village of Giulino di Mesegra on Lake Como. A partisan officer known as Colonel Valerio lined the couple up against a stone wall and shot them with a submachine gun at 4:10 p.m. Mussolini died instantly, slumping to the ground riddled with bullets. The one-time Duce of Italy died not with a fascist salute or final speech, but with his back to a wall and no ceremony. Just another tyrant brought to summary justice. That evening, the partisans moved to make a public example of the fascist leaders. They loaded the bodies of Mussolini, Petacci, and other executed fascist officials into a truck and drove to Milan. Their destination was Piazzale Loreto, a square already infamous as the site where fascists had executed 15 partisans the previous year. Arriving in the early hours of April 29th, the partisans dumped Mussolini's corpse and the others onto the pavement for all to see. Word spread rapidly through Milan. By morning, a large crowd had gathered in Piazzale Loreto, eager to witness the final downfall of the dictator. What ensued was a scene of raw, explosive emotion. As Mussolini's bloody body lay in the square, ordinary Italians vented years of pent-up rage. They spat on the corpses, kicked them, and shouted vulgar insults. Some slapped and struck Mussolini's lifeless face, which was soon disfigured by the blows. Others emptied their bladders on the bodies, an ultimate gesture of contempt. Gunshots rang out as partisans or bereaved civilians fired into the corpses. One grieving mother shot Mussolini's body 5 times, screaming, "5 shots for my 5 sons," avenging the sons she lost because of Mussolini's wars. The crowd's anger was so intense that many cried that Mussolini had gotten off too easily with a quick death. "He died too quickly, we want him to suffer," some shouted. Many demanded that the bodies be left on display indefinitely as a warning. The atmosphere in the square was a volatile mix of celebration, hatred, and catharsis. An American journalist on the scene described the mob as sinister, depraved, out of control, a frenzy of vengeance that was both frightening and telling. Fearing that the crowd might literally tear the bodies apart, the partisans took action. They found some ropes and hoisted Mussolini's body, along with Petacci's and others, up onto the steel girder of a half-built gas station in the square. Hanging the bodies upside down by the feet served 2 purposes. It kept the mob from further defiling the remains, and it delivered a final symbolic humiliation. In Italy, hanging a traitor upside down had long been a mark of disgrace. Now Mussolini, who had once been hailed as Italy's saviour, hung inverted like a butchered carcass, exposed to ridicule. The crowd roared its approval at this ghastly display. It was the ultimate visual epitaph for Il Duce's regime. The brutal chaos of the Piazzale Loreto scene marked the climax of Italy's reckoning with its fascist tormentor. By midday on April 29, Allied authorities, who had now entered Milan, were appalled by the chaotic spectacle. They ordered the partisans to take down the bodies and restore order. Mussolini's body and the others were loaded into a truck once again and driven off to the city morgue. In the days that followed, Italy was both in turmoil and in a state of relief. The war in Italy ended shortly after, and ordinary Italians reacted to Mussolini's fate with a mix of grim satisfaction and somber reflection. As news of Mussolini's demise spread, Italians largely felt relief and vindication, though the brutal manner of his death gave some pause. Many viewed it as justice served after years of oppression and war. Crowds across the country celebrated the liberation of Italy from fascism, even if the grisly end to Mussolini's life also made them shudder. Few truly mourned Il Duce. His death in such a manner became a final testament to how deeply fascism had scarred the nation. The images from Piazzale Loreto shocked the world, underscoring the total repudiation of fascism by the Italian people. Newspapers around the globe printed photographs of Mussolini's corpse hanging upside down, making him a potent example of a dictator's ignominious demise. It was widely deemed a fitting end to a wretched life. Upon hearing of Mussolini's fate, Adolf Hitler became even more determined to avoid capture. Hitler noted how Mussolini's body had been abused by crowds and resolved not to be taken alive. On April 30th, 1945, the very next day, Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker and had his own corpse burned with gasoline. Mussolini's fate thus influenced Hitler's final decision. The Nazi leader ensured there would be no public spectacle of his body, no Piazzale Loreto in Berlin. By early May 1945, World War II in Europe was over. Fascism as a governing force had been obliterated, its two chief architects dead at their own or their captors' hands. In the longer term, Mussolini's downfall cleared the path for a new Italy. In 1946, Italians voted in a national referendum to abolish the monarchy, blaming the king for enabling fascism, and to establish Italy as a democratic republic. The post-war Italian constitution banned any resurrection of the fascist party and enshrined freedoms that Mussolini had trampled. Mussolini's body, after the Milan episode, was buried in secret by the authorities to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine for fascist sympathizers. A fringe of nostalgic admirers persisted in later decades, but they remained vastly outnumbered by those who remembered fascism as a dark lesson not to be repeated. For the vast majority of Italians, Mussolini's name became a byword for tyranny and disastrous leadership. The imagery of his ignominious end, Italians desecrating their former dictator, served as the ultimate symbol that fascism had been vanquished on Italian soil. Thank you for watching.